There's a very specific kind of love that doesn't shout, it doesn't chase, it doesn't overwhelm you with constant validation. Instead, it confuses you because one moment they're deeply present, almost like they see through you, and the next, they pull away, go quiet, create distance that makes you question everything. And you start asking yourself, if they really loved me, wouldn't they stay? But here's the truth most people completely miss. Avoidants don't struggle with love, they struggle with safety inside love. And when an avoidant truly loves you, it doesn't look loud, it doesn't look obvious, it looks different. It looks like someone who doesn't just want your attention, but someone who is deeply connected to your soul. So today, let's break the illusion. Because if you understand these signs, you'll stop chasing surface level validation and start recognizing something far more rare. There's something incredibly subtle, but deeply powerful about the way an avoidant begins to open up to you. It doesn't happen in big, dramatic confessions. It's not like they suddenly sit down and pour their heart out in one emotional moment. In fact, if that's what you're expecting, you might completely miss what's actually happening, because with them, it's quieter than that. But it starts in fragments, small pieces of truth they let slip through the cracks. A story from their past they don't usually tell, a fear they quickly laugh off after mentioning, a moment where they almost say something vulnerable, then pull back as if they've revealed too much. And if you're not paying attention, you'll think that's nothing, but it's not nothing. For someone who is wired to protect themselves emotionally, every little reveal is a risk. Every moment of honesty feels like standing without armor, and they don't do that for just anyone. They do it with you. You'll notice that around others, they keep things surface level. Conversations stay light, controlled, predictable. But with you, there are moments where the mask slips, moments where they don't seem as composed, where they're a little more real, a little more human. And that's your proof. Not because they're giving you everything, but because they're giving you what they can. This is where many people get it wrong. They compare an avoidance way of opening up to someone else's emotional expression. They expect the same depth, the same consistency, the same verbal reassurance. But that's not how this works. With an avoidant, depth isn't shown through intensity. It's shown through exclusivity. The fact that they choose you as the person they slowly let in, that's the signal, that's the meaning behind it. And sometimes it's not even about what they say, it's about what they allow you to see. The pauses, the hesitation, the moments where they almost shut down, but don't, because it's you. That internal battle, that's real. Part of them wants to retreat, to stay safe, to keep everything locked inside. But another part, the part that feels connected to you, is pushing against that instinct. And when someone is fighting themselves just to let you in, that's not casual interest. That's emotional investment on a level most people don't even recognize. But here's the challenge. It requires patience to see it. It requires emotional awareness to understand it. Because if you're only looking for loud expressions of love, you'll overlook the quiet bravery it takes for them to open up at all. And if you dismiss those small moments, if you make them feel like it's not enough, they'll retreat even more, not because they don't care, but because in their mind they tried and it still wasn't safe. So when an avoidant begins to open up to you, even in the smallest ways, don't rush it, don't pressure it, don't demand more before they're ready. Just recognize what it is, because what looks small on the outside is actually something very big happening underneath. There's a pattern that can feel incredibly confusing, even painful. When you're dealing with an avoidant, they pull away, sometimes suddenly, sometimes right when things start to feel closer, deeper, more real. And in that moment, it can hit you like rejection. It can make you feel like everything you built meant nothing. But then they come back, and not in a random, careless way. There's a familiarity in how they return, a quiet pull, like something inside them couldn't fully let go. This is where most people get stuck. They focus only on the distance and completely miss the meaning behind the return. Because an avoidant doesn't just circle back to everyone. They don't re-enter every connection they leave. In fact, for most people, once they create distance, that's it. They move on, detach, and never look back. So if someone keeps finding their way back to you, that's not accidental. That's emotional gravity. It means that no matter how far they go, something about you stays with them. Something about the connection doesn't fully switch off. Even when they try to create space and understand this clearly, it's not always comfortable for them. Coming back means facing emotions they were trying to escape. It means stepping back into a connection that makes them feel vulnerable again. It means risking closeness, the very thing they often struggle with. So why do they do it? Because what they feel with you doesn't exist everywhere. You're not just another option. You're not just someone who gave them attention. You're someone who created a depth they can't easily replace. And that's why even after distance, even after silence, they return. But here's where it gets important. Their return is not always loud. It's not always an apology or a grand gesture. Sometimes it's subtle, a message, a reaction, a small attempt to reconnect. And if you're expecting something dramatic, you might overlook it. But those small returns, they matter. They're their way of saying, I'm still here, I just don't know how to do this perfectly. Now, this doesn't mean you ignore the pattern. It doesn't mean you accept inconsistency without boundaries. Because someone coming back doesn't automatically equal emotional readiness, but it does reveal something deeper than surface level interest. It shows that no matter how much they try to detach, they can't fully disconnect from you. And that's the difference. Anyone can show up when it's easy, but someone who comes back, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it challenges them internally, that's someone who feels something real. The question is not just why they return. The real question is, will they ever learn to stay? There's a quiet intensity in the way an avoidant listens to you. And if you're only looking for loud expressions of love, you might completely miss it. Because they're not always the ones talking the most. They're not always the ones expressing everything they feel in words. In fact, sometimes you might even think, do they even care this much? But watch closely, because while others are trying to impress you, they're trying to understand you. They notice the small shifts in your tone. They pick up on the moments when your energy changes. They remember things you said casually, things even you forgot you shared, and they don't always point it out. That's what makes it so easy to overlook. See, an avoidant often lives in observation mode. It feels safer for them to take in information than to reveal too much of themselves. So instead of expressing loudly, they study quietly. And when someone is just looking for notion, they don't do that. They don't invest that level of focus. They don't pay attention to your emotional patterns, your triggers, your habits, your subtle expressions. They stay at the surface because that's all they need. But this is different. This is someone who is tuning into your inner world without needing constant validation in return. You might notice it in moments where you're not at your best. You didn't say anything directly, but somehow they sense it. They might not ask in the most emotionally expressive way, but there's a shift in how they respond to you. Maybe they become softer. Maybe they give you space without you asking. Maybe they check in with a simple message that feels oddly timed, like they knew. That's not random, that's awareness, and awareness like that doesn't come from someone who is just casually interested. It comes from someone who is emotionally invested, even if they don't fully understand how to express it. But here's where it can feel frustrating, because while they're listening deeply, they're not always speaking deeply. So you might feel seen, but not reassured, understood, but not emotionally held in the way you need. And that gap can create confusion. You start questioning, if they understand me this well, why can't they just say how they feel? But for them, expression feels like exposure. It feels like giving up control. So instead, they choose the safer route. They listen, they observe, they stay connected in a way that doesn't force them to fully open up. And that's why their love can feel so quiet. Not absent, just unspoken. So if you really want to understand what's happening, don't just listen to their words. Watch their attention, because attention is where their truth lives. Anyone can say the right things, but not everyone will take the time to truly see you. And when someone consistently pays attention to details of who you are without needing the spotlight on themselves, that's not someone chasing attention. That's someone who's already connected to something much deeper within you. There's a moment in most connections where space becomes a test. You pull back a little, not to play games, not to create distance, but simply to breathe, to return to yourself. And what happens next usually tells you everything about the other person. Some people panic, they chase harder, they need constant reassurance to feel secure. But an avoidant who truly feels something for you, they do something very different, they let you have your space. And at first, that can feel confusing, even unsettling, because part of you might interpret that as indifference. You might think if they really cared, wouldn't they try harder to hold on to me right now? But that reaction is coming from a place that equates love with urgency. For them, it's not urgency, it's respect. They don't see your need for space as a threat to the connection. They don't immediately assume you're leaving or losing interest. Instead, they allow it. They give it room. They trust that what exists between you doesn't need constant pressure to survive. And that's a very different kind of connection, because when someone is only attached to your attention, they can't tolerate distance. Your silence makes them anxious. Your independence feels like rejection. So they try to close the gap as quickly as possible. Not always out of love, but out of fear of losing validation. But this is calmer than that. An avoidant who values you doesn't need to chase your presence every second to feel connected. They carry the connection internally. It doesn't disappear just because you're not constantly interacting. That's why they don't rush in when you step back. Not because they don't care, but because they're not trying to control you. They're allowing you to exist as your own person without making it about their insecurity. And there's something deeply meaningful in that. Even if it doesn't feel obvious at first, you might notice that even when there's distance, they don't replace you. They don't suddenly shift their energy somewhere else. There's a consistency in how they hold space for you, even in your absence. It's subtle, but it's there. They might not flood you with messages. They might not constantly check in. But when you reconnect, it doesn't feel like starting over. It feels like picking up where you left off. That continuity, that quiet stability, that's not something you find in surface level connections. But here's the part that matters. Respecting your space is powerful, but only if it's paired with emotional presence when you come back together. B. All space should feel like freedom, not like disconnection. And this is where you have to stay aware. Just because someone doesn't chase you doesn't automatically mean they're deeply connected. But when their calmness is paired with consistency, when they remain steady without needing to control the connection, that's when you're looking at something deeper. It's not about holding on tightly. It's about not letting go, even when there's space in between. There's a certain kind of frustration that comes when you're waiting to hear the words and they just don't come. You want clarity, you want reassurance, you want to feel chosen in a way that's undeniable. But with an avoidant, love rarely arrives in perfectly spoken sentences. It shows up in behavior, and if you're only listening to what they say, you might completely miss what they say, you might completely miss, because they may not sit there and tell you how much you mean to them. But watch how they show up when it matters. Watch the moments where they didn't have to be there, but they were. Watch the small, almost invisible ways they make your life easier. The quiet support, the subtle protection of your peace, the way they step in without announcing it. That's their language. It's not loud. It's not performative. It doesn't seek recognition. But it's intentional. Someone who just wants your attention will give you words all day long. They'll tell you everything you want to hear, especially when it benefits them. They'll create emotional highs with promises, compliments, and constant reassurance. But when it comes to real presence, real effort, that's where they disappear. An avoidant who truly cares operates in the opposite way. They may struggle to articulate their feelings, but when something is important to you, they remember. When you're going through something, they find a way to be there, even if it's not in the most expressive form. It might be a simple check-in. It might be solving a problem for you without making a big deal about it. It might be them showing up physically when you need support, even if they don't say much. And to them, that is love, because actions feel safer than words. Words feel exposing. Words create expectations they're not always sure they can live up to. So instead of promising, they do. Instead of declaring, they demonstrate. But here's where it becomes difficult for you. Because actions without words can feel incomplete. You start questioning things. You wonder, if they really feel this much, why can't they just say it? And that gap between what they do and what they say can leave you emotionally unsettled. You feel cared for, but not fully secure, seen, but not fully reassured. And that's a real emotional conflict. Because on one hand, their actions prove something deeper. But on the other hand, your heart still needs to hear it. And this is where you have to be honest with yourself. Recognizing their love language doesn't mean ignoring your own needs. Yes, their actions are meaningful. Yes, they reveal a level of care that goes beyond surface level attention. But love shouldn't feel like something you have to constantly translate just to understand. Because while it's powerful that they show up through actions, healthy love is when actions and words begin to align. So don't dismiss what they do, but don't silence what you need either. Because you deserve a love that doesn't just prove itself quietly, but also speaks to your heart in a way you can finally feel at peace with. There's something almost paradoxical about an avoidant when it comes to fear. On the surface, they seem calm, detached, unaffected, like nothing really gets to them. And especially when it comes to you, they might act like losing you wouldn't shake them, like they're completely in control, completely unbothered, completely fine on their own. But that's the surface. Underneath that, there's a very different reality. Because when an avoidant truly connects with someone, not just on a physical or casual level, but on a deeper emotional level, it creates something they're not used to handling, attachment. And attachment for them feels dangerous, not because they don't want it, but because they don't know how to trust it. So instead of expressing fear the way most people do, through vulnerability, through honesty, through saying, I don't want to lose you, they do the opposite. They suppress it, they distance self, bends from it. They act like it doesn't exist. But here's what most people don't realize. You don't create that kind of internal conflict in someone unless you matter deeply. If you were just another person, just another source of attention, there would be no fear to suppress. They would walk away easily, cleanly, without hesitation. But when you start to matter, when you reach a part of them that feels real, meaningful, irreplaceable, that's when the fear begins. And instead of pulling you closer, it sometimes makes them step back. Not because they want to lose you, but because losing control over their emotions feels even more terrifying. So they try to manage it in the only way they know how, by acting like they don't need you, by creating space when things get too intense, by keeping parts of themselves guarded even when they feel more than they show. And from the outside, it can look like indifference. It can feel like you're not important, like you're the only one who cares, like you're the only one afraid of losing what you have. But that's not always the truth. Sometimes the one who looks the most unaffected is the one fighting the hardest battle internally. Because admitting that they could lose you means admitting that you have power in their life. And that level of vulnerability is something they're not used to holding. So instead, they hide it, they bury it under silence, under distance, under control. But it shows up in other ways, in the way they don't fully let go, even when things get complicated, in the way they linger, even when they pretend to move on, in the subtle tension between wanting closeness and fearing it at the same time. That tension, that push and pull, that's not confusion. That's fear, and specifically fear of losing something that actually matters. But here's the part you have to understand clearly. Just because someone fears losing you, doesn't mean they know how to love you properly. Fear is not the same as emotional maturity, and while it can explain their behavior, it doesn't excuse inconsistency, distance, or lack of clarity. Because real growth happens when someone doesn't just feel the fear, but chooses to face it, chooses to communicate, chooses to show up differently, chooses to stop hiding behind emotional walls. So yes, they may fear losing you more than they will ever admit. But the real question is, will they ever become brave enough to love you in a way where you don't have to feel lost in the process? At the end of all this, what you begin to realize is that love doesn't always come in the form you expected. Sometimes it doesn't arrive with certainty, clarity, and perfectly spoken words. Sometimes it comes wrapped in silence, in distance, in behaviors that feel confusing at first. And when you're dealing with someone avoidant, you're not just experiencing love, you're experiencing someone's internal struggle with love itself. That doesn't make the connection fake. In many cases, it makes it deeper. Because what they feel isn't casual, it's something they don't fully know how to handle. And that's why it feels different. But understanding this truth requires emotional maturity. It requires you to stop measuring love only by what is visible and obvious and start recognizing what exists beneath the surface. The way they open up slowly, the way they return even after distance, the way they observe you, respect your space, show up through actions, and silently fear losing you. These are not random behaviors. They are patterns that point towards something real, something rooted not in attention, but in connection, not in surface level attraction, but in something that reaches deeper into who you are. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. However, there's an important shift you must make. If you truly want to protect your heart, just because someone loves your soul doesn't mean they are ready to love you in a healthy, consistent, and fulfilling way. And this is where so many people lose themselves. They recognize the depth, they feel the connection, and they start excusing the inconsistency. They start excusing the inconsistency. They start accepting less than what they deserve, holding on to potential instead of reality. But love, real love, is not just about how deeply someone feels. It's about how safely, clearly, and consistently they can show up in your life. You are not here to decode someone forever. You are not here to translate silence into meaning or to turn small moments into full emotional security. You are here to experience love that not only touches your soul, but also gives you peace. So while it's powerful to understand an avoidance way of loving, it's equally powerful to set boundaries around what you will and will not accept, because your emotional needs matter just as much as their emotional limitations. And the right connection will never require you to abandon yourself just to hold on to it. So take this understanding as clarity, not as a reason to stay stuck. If they love your soul, you'll feel it in the depth, in the pull, in the unspoken connection that keeps bringing them back. But if they are truly ready for you, you won't just feel depth, you'll feel stability. You won't just feel connection, you'll feel peace. And that's the standard, not confusion, not inconsistency, not emotional guessing games. Because the kind of love you deserve isn't just something you have to understand deeply. It's something you should be able to feel fully without losing yourself in the process. Thank you for being here, for listening with an open heart, and for allowing yourself to explore something deeper than surface level love. Conversations like this aren't always easy because they skew to reflect, to question, and sometimes to face truths that are uncomfortable. But that's where real growth begins. And the fact that you stayed, that you listened, that you're trying to understand, it says a lot about the kind of person you are. If something in this message resonated with you, hold on to that clarity. Not to overthink your situation, but to see it more honestly. You deserve a love that doesn't leave you confused about where you stand. You deserve connection, depth, and peace all at the same time. Never forget that. Take care of your heart, protect your energy, and never settle for anything that makes you question your worth. Thank you again for your time, and until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and keep choosing yourself. Goodbye for now.